Today we are in beautiful Sharpsburg, Maryland, a town that's located in Washington County. It's located approximately 13 miles south of Hagerstown, Maryland. Population was 705 at the 10,010 census. During the American Civil War, the Battle of Antietam, or the Battle of Sharpsburg, was fought on what is now Antietam National Battlefield in the vicinity of Antietam Creek. And the Antietam National Battlefield is a very important source of local tourism and activities. The Battle of Antietam was a battle of the American Civil War fought on September the 17th, 1862, between Confederate General Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia and Union General George B. McClellan's Army of the Potomac. This battle was fought near Sharpsburg, Maryland, and Antietam Creek. Part of the Maryland campaign, it was the first field army level engagement in the eastern theater of the American Civil War to take place on Union soil. It was the bloodiest day in American history, with a combined tally of 22,717 dead, wounded, or missing. Casualties at the Battle of Antietam were catastrophic. The result, the Union Army suffered 12,400, the Confederate Army suffered 10,300. And that's in a 12-hour span. The result of the battle was a tactical draw. However, the Confederate Army did abandon the field and retreat back into Virginia via the Shenandoah Valley, thus ending Robert E. Lee's invasion of the North. The battle also became ingrained in the minds of Americans because of an enterprising photographer named Alex Gardner. He visited the battlefield within days of the fighting. Dead soldiers still in the field were like nothing anyone had ever seen before. Lee's objective was to win a much-needed victory on Northern soil. He believed this would gain the Confederacy European recognition. Again, Lee's retreat gave President Abraham Lincoln the opportunity he needed to issue his Emancipation Proclamation, which declared all slaves residing in rebelling Confederate territory against the federal government to be free. This act made it even more unlikely that Europe would grant diplomatic recognition to the South. It was the bloodiest day in American history, with a combined tally of 22,717 dead, wounded, or missing. One of the biggest questions that's asked is, why are battlefields so haunted? Why are they such a great source of paranormal activity? Well, the American Civil War was one of the bloodiest wars ever fought. Since it was waged totally on American soil, it pitted brother against brother, family against family, and nearly split the country in two. Approximately 1 million men were killed or wounded. It is therefore no wonder that some of these battlefields are the most haunted in the world. You have to remember, battlefields were places of violence, trauma, intense emotion, and adrenaline, often associated with haunted phenomenon. Few places have seen more violence than battlefields. Some battlefield soldiers may be trapped spirits of the dead. The suddenness and violence of their deaths may have prevented their full departure from the earthly plane, or they may not be aware that they're dead. Over the years, the sunken road called Bloody Lane has become known as one of the most eerie places on the battlefield. Reports over the years tell of sounds of phantom gunfire echoing along the sunken road and the smell of smoke and gunpowder, which seems to come from nowhere. Many people have cited Confederate soldiers in the area, thinking they are reenactors, only to discover that they would abruptly vanish. And these ghostly apparitions are not the only thing experienced here. There's absolutely no doubt at all that the Civil War was one of the most tragic chapters in American history. 620,000 Americans lost their lives during the Civil War. They were lost in battle, from illness, and awful circumstances that the Civil War brought. It's no surprise that there are countless hauntings reported around areas where the battles took place. With so much turbulence, violence, grief, loss, it left a literal scar on the earth. If you visit any battlefield today, you'll see bullets implanted in trees. There are holes in the ground from cannon fire, and even bloodstains that Mother Nature has carefully preserved. With this in mind, it is no surprise that these areas are riddled with ghost stories. Absolutely riddled. The Civil War violated to good death old men, young men, children. They were all swept up and recruited to fight. Most of these soldiers died on the site of their battle. Depending on where they passed, their remains were handled differently. Take, for example, Confederate soldiers who died during Gettysburg were left in ditches, riverbanks, or shallow graves. Many of these remains were destroyed when the rains came in after the battle. Union soldiers that died at Gettysburg were collected and eventually placed in the Soldiers' National Cemetery. This is where Lincoln delivered his famous Gettysburg Address. There are countless stories of Southern boys dying up north, so their families never heard what happened until long after. Families often traveled to battlefields to find their lost loved ones. Many were successful, but many weren't. The closure that was stripped away from these families and lack of closure most likely translated into the afterlife. And then there are those who have spent time at Burnside Bridge on the battlefield, especially park rangers and Civil War reenactors. They've been to the location many times after dark. They say there are strange things going on here all the time as well. Historians and experts report that fighting, which took place here in 1862, left a number of dead, fallen soldiers behind, and many of them were hastily buried in unknown locations near and around the bridge. Visitors to the bridge at night have reported visions of blue balls of light moving in the darkness and the sound of a phantom drum that beats out of cadence and then fades away. It appears some of the soldiers who perished during the Antietam battle are more than just a memory. You have to remember as well, the spiritualism movement began before the events of the Civil War. But it was the war that caused it to reach incredible proportions, with mediums rising up every day. Because these families didn't have closure, and the soldiers had no way to tell their loved ones they were okay, spiritualism filled in the gaps. There's a moral dilemma in spiritualism since it gave closure to so many people, but eventually it was realized that many of these self-proclaimed psychics were faking it. And let's just talk in general about energy. Have you ever been or entered a room after two people have had a fight? Have you ever been someplace where there was a lot of tension but no one told you what was happening? There are theories that this feeling translates into the paranormal as well. Since there was so much energy with the events of the Civil War, all the devastation, heartache, and loss can still be felt around these places. Perhaps it isn't paranormal at all. Instead, it's the energy left behind and the feelings we experience when we recount the tragedy of the bloodiest battle to ever take place on American soil. The National Museum of Civil War Medicine is a U.S. historic education institution located in Frederick, Maryland, not far from the Antietam battlefield. Its focus involves the medical, surgical, and nursing practices during the American Civil War. The museum, which was originally proposed by Dr. Gordon E. Damon, a private collector of Civil War-era medical artifacts, was incorporated in 1990 and first opened to the public in 1996. The museum moved into its current location, three-story 19th century brick building that was home to a furniture maker undertaker operation during the Civil War. The museum contains over some 5,000 artifacts. The National Museum of Civil War Medicine is where you can go back into history and follow in the footsteps of surgeons and soldiers of the Civil War, discover the harsh conditions that they would have faced, as well as the personal sacrifices they would have made. The most famous amputation in the museum is its Antietam arm, which is a mummified human limb that left the breast of its body on September 17, 1862, during the Battle of Antietam. It was probably blown off by an artillery shell. The arm's display notes that farmers plowing the battlefield turned up human remains for years, although it was rare to find bones still covered with flesh and skin. Then the Smithsonian subjected the arm to 2 years of test. The results? All that could be determined was the arm belonged to a teenage Caucasian male, probably a Yankee. The arm was discovered in the area around Burnside Bridge. Another medical advance that came out of the Civil War was mass embalming. And the museum actually has a life-size diorama of Dr. Richard Burr, who abandoned sawing limbs from live soldiers to a more lucrative profession of pumping chemicals into dead ones. And incredibly, the museum building and Dr. Burr have an intimate connection, because the museum building was the notorious doctor's embalming station. A lot of dead people come through the museum building, unrestful souls, so to speak. It's claimed that it's definitely the most haunted building in Frederick, Maryland. Incredibly, museum management have claimed that there's been more than one apparition that's been captured on the museum's CCTV cameras. Amazingly, there have been some that have been able to walk through walls. The museum is so haunted that it offers special October tours where the staff simply describe their personal ghost experiences in every room. Many visitors have claimed there have been phantom specters that have tapped them on the shoulder or finger flicked their ear. It's happened on more than several occasions. And if you're interested in visiting the National Museum of Civil War Medicine, it's located at 48 East Patrick Street, Frederick, Maryland. Admission is adults $9.50, seniors $8.50, and students $7. Hours of operation are Thursday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., Sunday 11 p.m. to 5 p.m., and Monday through Wednesday by appointment only.